Thank you all for being here today to help me celebrate this accomplishment, my second book. I will be honest, this is not a place that I thought I was ever going to be again, writing another book. My first book, To Root and to Rise, took me 12 years. I think odyssey is a good word to describe the journey of writing my first book. Because that first book, it was a process of starting, of giving up, because I felt like my brain injury symptoms were too much. I couldn't do the writing. I didn't know what I wanted to say. I didn't feel like I had a voice. I didn't feel like I had anything worthwhile to share. Writing group helped me very much realize that I do indeed have a voice, have a perspective to share with the brain injury community. And it was a 12-year process to come to own that voice, to own my story, and to realize what it was that I wanted to write about in Root and Rise, which was the acceptance process. And after I finished that book, I thought, okay, I'm done. That I couldn't see that I was ever going to write another book again. I thought, okay, I'm not done speaking about brain injury. I'm not done telling my story, but I feel like I've written what I need to write. And people would ask me, well, are you going to ever write another book? Oh, no, I'm done with book publishing. I have done what I wanted to do. It was a lifelong dream for me to publish a book. I achieved that with Root and Rise. Okay. Well, and for many years, that was indeed true. Then came 2024. Which was the year of the 25th anniversary of my brain injury. My brainiversary. My silver anniversary, hence where I got the title Silver Learnings, hence why there's a lot of silver around for this party today. And I'm somebody who likes to commemorate things. I like to think about, well, especially a big milestone. And I knew that 25 years living with brain injury, I can't let that go unnoticed, uncelebrated, talked about. So what do I want to do? So when I don't know what to do, I generally pick up a pen and I start to journal and I start to think about it. And as I journaled kind of early on in 2024, I remembered that back at my 20th brain anniversary, I had started to write down lessons, things that I had learned in my then 20-year brain injury journey with the idea, maybe I'll do something with this. I didn't know what, but it wasn't the right time then. And that project just went by the wayside. But being the pack rat that I am, I saved that piece of paper it had maybe 8, 10 lessons written on it. I keep a folder on my desk with ideas. And so I squirreled that away. And in my journaling early on in 2024, I remembered that piece of paper. And I thought about, 25 years, 25 lessons. That sounds like a worthwhile project. Did I think it was going to be a book at that point? Honestly, I had no idea what it was going to be. All I knew was I wanted to come up with things I had learned in my journey of 25 years living with brain injury. So I kept on journaling. I kept on kind of writing down things that I had learned, still with no idea what I was going to do with them. So then it was sometime roughly kind of late winter-ish in 2024. I was having breakfast with my father and my sister, and we happened to run into the chair of the main brain injury conference committee. And she asked me, oh, Carole, do you have any ideas for keynotes? And it was like this light bulb went off in my brain. I think all the writing I had been doing just sort of, the idea went off. And I realized those 25 lessons, yes, I did have an idea for a keynote, that I wanted to turn those 25 lessons into a keynote. So my breakfast went cold. Mary and Dad, they ate without me. Poor Janet, I kept her away from her family. Well, I just prattled on and on about this idea for a keynote that literally, until that moment, I hadn't even had the idea I said, yes, I want to do these 25 lessons. I'm going to do live polling. The audience is going to choose which lessons I talk about. All of this was just kind of pouring out of me. Poor Janet couldn't get back to her family. And I think she said, well, why don't you apply? So I did apply for the keynote, and they did select me. So then I had a bit of a problem, because I'd promised all this stuff. And what I realized was, all right, I'm going to write 25 lessons, and if I'm going to have the audience do live polling, well, that means I have to write all 25, because I don't know what the audience is going to choose for me to talk about. And 25 lessons is basically like 3 keynotes. So over the course of the spring and the summer of 2024, I did indeed put together all 25 lessons. I chose images to go with those 25 lessons, and found that the process of choosing images to go with the lessons, it influenced how I thought about what I'd learned. There was a back and forth, which I really enjoyed, between the writing and the searching for the images. I did a video, and I did that keynote in the fall of 2024. Some of you were there. And it was a wonderful experience, one of the highlights of my keynoting experience so far. And I knew after I had done that keynote, because it's still at this point, I was not thinking that this was a book. While I was working on the keynote, there were a few times where I thought, well, is this a book? But I would instantly push that thought aside. No, this is not a book. And I think because doing the keynote first, it was such a big project that I couldn't even comprehend that it could also be a book. I just had to push it aside. But then after the keynote was done, I knew that I'd created something that was bigger than a keynote, something that I wanted to bring into the world in a broader kind of a way, that I wanted these lessons to live in the world not only when I gave a keynote, that I wanted more people to be able to benefit from all of the wisdom that I've gained in 25 years of living with brain injury. But how do I do that? And I didn't know. So back to the pen and the paper I went, and I journaled about that some. I reread all of the lessons that I had written for the keynote, and I thought about, is this a blog? Is this a video log? Is this a webinar? What is this? And it was sometime around, I think, November-ish of 2024 when it hit me. I've written the rough draft of a book. It was, in all honesty, a remarkable realization to realize that I wrote the rough draft of a book without even realizing I'd written the rough draft of a book. And I realized that I was wrong when I thought I was done writing books with To Root and To Rise, that I did have more to say about my experience, about what I'd learned, and that this was the way that I wanted to do it. This was the vehicle to bring more of what I've learned out to help other people. So January 1st, 2025, I started working on the book, taking that rough draft from in speech form and turning it into a book. And here we are, almost a year to the day later, and the book is in the world. It's actually been in the world now for a few months, but I really look at today as its true birthday, the day that I get to celebrate this with family and friends, that it is its true kind of launch, into the world. So what I'd like to do is to read you a few chapters to give you a sense of how this book is structured, so you can see some of the illustrations that go along with it, to know kind of how I think about things. Then, depending on our time, we'll open it up to any questions that folks might have. Let's see. There it goes. So there are 5 different sections in the book. Because 25 lessons, that's like a lot of lessons to comprehend. So it was important for me to divide them. The 5 sections are coping with brain injury, hard truths, helpful mindsets, accepting a new self, and thriving with brain injury. And I chose these sections because I think that they mirror the process that we go through when we're dealing with brain injury, also when we're dealing with any kind of challenging life circumstance. That early on, we work on coping. We work on how am I going to live with this sudden life change. Brain injury, sudden life change often comes with hard truths. Those pieces of the process that we don't want to accept, that are difficult. There are mindsets that can help us move forward, and ultimately lead towards accepting the fact that we are different, that our lives are different, and then leading towards thriving. We may never be the same as we were before. Thriving doesn't necessarily mean going back to who we were, but thriving within the changes that an injury or illness has brought upon us. So the lessons are divided among those categories. So the first one that I want to read from you is from Coping. So I chose this picture to go along with coping, the keys, because I think about brain injury. I think about brain injury closes doors in our lives. It closes the door of who we used to be. It closes the door of who we thought we were going to be. It closes the door of how we function. So in order to cope with all of that, we need to find keys to function in new ways, keys to learn how to live as we are now. So the keys seemed like a good metaphor for this section, because the doors that we're trying to find, they're not the doors that go back to who we used to be. They are doors that go towards who we are now. So the section, the chapter that I'm going to read, is embrace strategies. Use what works now. Those of you who have known me for a long time know how much I struggled with this concept. I think I was the poster child for not wanting to use strategies. That I thought strategies, that's a 4-letter word. That I did not want to have to do anything in any way, shape, or form differently than the way I had always done them. But when I eventually opened up to using strategies, it changed my life in ways that were so much better. It took me a long time, a number of years, to get there. But it is such an important piece of the brain injury journey, learning to accept that we do have to do things in different ways. So here's that chapter. In the first year after my brain injury, I was confused, lost, isolated, and afraid. I kept trying to return to my old life, only to fail repeatedly. When I was eventually referred to an outpatient brain injury rehabilitation program, I was relieved. Finally, someone was going to fix me so I could get back to my life. When the rehabilitation program began, I was surprised and dismayed that my therapist focused much of our time together talking about how I could compensate for my challenges by using strategies. They wanted me to learn how to manage my brain injury deficits. I wanted them to make those deficits disappear and heal my brain injury. I resisted my therapist's strategy-based approach. I believed if I used the strategies they recommended, memory aids, lists, pacing, meal planning, then I was giving in to the brain injury, letting it win, giving up, not healing. Back to my pre-injury normal was how I judged success. Anything that didn't measure up to that standard was a failure in my eyes. If I couldn't get back to who I was worthless, damaged goods. I thought using strategies would hold me back. I was wrong in how I looked at strategies. Accepting and using them doesn't hold us back. Strategies can help move us forward. They're not a roadblock to progress. They're a bridge to a new life. Strategies can help us build a path to success. When there's a space between where we are now and where we want to be, strategies can be the missing puzzle piece that fills in the gap. Strategies keep us focused on the present. When we concentrate on who we are now and embrace what works for us in this moment, we set ourselves up for a better life. One of my biggest fears was that using strategies would stop my brain from healing. That hasn't been true for me. I use strategies, and I continue to make small gains to this day. I've learned that pursuing healing and using strategies are not mutually exclusive. We don't have to choose one over the other. Both can happen together, and both can help us move forward. Many of us start out resistant to using strategies. For a long time, all we can see is getting back to the lives we had. It takes time to recognize what's been lost and to grieve. Overcoming resistance is a process. I can't say I let go of resistance and embrace strategies because I saw the logic in using them. Family, friends, and brain injury professionals were all unsuccessful in convincing me. I know my resistance frustrated them at times. I see some nods out there. When I did eventually embrace strategies, it was mostly due to a combination of exhaustion and inspiration. Failing repeatedly at previously simple tasks wore me down. Those failures brought on exhaustion and a desperate desire to succeed again. That softened my resistance and opened me up to trying strategies to manage my life. The inspiration came from other brain injury survivors. Through the outpatient brain injury rehabilitation program I attended, I met brain injury survivors whose injuries were older than mine. They modeled using strategies to make their lives work better. The example of my peers got through to me when no one else could. Now, as a wholehearted strategy embracer, whenever a task is difficult or I get overwhelmed, my first thought is, what strategy can I use? Or who can help me figure out a strategy that will help? That enthusiasm does come with a disclaimer. Even now, as someone who's used strategies, I still sometimes feel stabs of sadness. There are moments I miss the old Carole and the ease of how things used to be. I wish I didn't need strategies. That ongoing grief is also part of the brain injury journey. However, there's no question that using strategies has made my life better. Embracing strategies can give us feelings of success instead of failure, help us live in the now rather than getting lost in the past, make life easier, and preserve our energy for other tasks. Strategies are not signs of defeat. They're signs of adaptation, creativity, and strength. Using them is a key to coping with brain injury. So the next section that I'd like to read from is Hard Truths. When I found this picture instantly communicated hard truths to me. Here in New England, we can relate to this kind of a picture. That idea of slogging through the snow, uphill with ice, hitting your face. That where putting just one foot in front of the other takes absolutely everything that you have. That really said hard truth to me. And brain injury is full of those times. I think especially early on, as we discover so many pieces that are out of our control, so many things that we wish were different, but aren't. It's interesting that it might seem weird, but this is actually my favorite section of the book. And it's my favorite section not because these are hard truths, but because I know what can happen when we put in the time and the effort and the tears to work through all of these hard truths. I know the transformation that can come from confronting these hard truths, because I have lived the transformation that comes from doing the work that is required to come to acceptance about that brain injury lasts forever, that grief is ongoing, that brain injury is full of inconsistency, some of those hard truths that are part of this section, that nothing changes these hard truths. They're still just as true for me today as they were when my injury was new. But coming to terms with them has made me a different person. And I think that's why this is my favorite section, because these things can be so very transformational. So the chapter that I'd like to read to you from this section is "The Journey Never Ends. There will always be brain injury symptoms to deal with." For a long time, I thought that if I could just find the right treatments and strategies, then I would be able to control my brain injury and make it mostly disappear. I desperately wanted to be normal again. While I knew I couldn't make my brain injury completely go away, I thought that the right supports would make it invisible, both to me and the outside world. Wrong. Let me first say that there is no question that treatments and strategies can make life better after brain injury. I continue to work to improve my quality of life, and I continue to make progress. However, even though I still see providers in a variety of modalities, and even though I use numerous strategies every day, I still have brain injury symptoms. My injury impacts my life every single day. I can do everything right to manage my brain injury, use strategies, pace myself, honor my new self, but still, there are days when my brain refuses to cooperate. Life falls apart, I overload, get confused, and spend most of my time resting on the couch. Dealing with ongoing symptoms and their fallout, that is part of the brain injury experience. I don't like it, but it is something to accept. It is a hard truth. We get to be sad about hard truths. We get to be frustrated by them. I freely admit that even though I have accepted all of my silver lining hard truths, there are still times, all these years later, when I feel sad and frustrated by them. And that's okay, because by definition, hard truths challenge us. They are hard to accept, and they are hard to live with. When we're confronted by the hard truth of ongoing brain injury symptoms, it's helpful to remember that we do have choices. And these choices remind us that we do have power. We can choose to acknowledge the reality that brain injury has changed us forever. We can choose to focus on living in the present moment versus dwelling in the past or worrying about the future. We can choose to reach out for help when sadness or frustration well up. We can choose to hold ourselves gently when brain injury symptoms rule our lives. This chapter's image of a person cradling a brain speaks to the importance of treating ourselves with gentleness and care. Self-compassion can soften the sharp edges of hard truths and make them a little easier to live with. The large amount of space around the brain in this picture matters too. We need both time and space to come to terms with the ongoing journey that is brain injury. Space to absorb the hard truths. Space to feel what we feel. Space to breathe. Space to rest. There may always be brain injury symptoms to deal with, but we can choose to cradle ourselves gently and to honor whatever space we need to move forward. When we've done the work through acknowledging and working through hard truths, when we've found helpful mindsets, that's when acceptance can begin to bloom. I liked this picture for accepting a new self because I really do think of acceptance as kind of like a Zen kind of moment. That I know that when I reached accepting my own injury and the fact that I was different, that I wasn't going to get the life that I had back, reaching acceptance, it didn't change any of my symptoms. I still had all of them, but I felt a different peace inside. And I think this image kind of reflects some of that feeling of peace that acceptance can bring. And the section I'm going to read here is, what can you do? Find something the new you is good at. Since my brain injury, I can't work full-time anymore, can't be the teacher the way I used to be, can't be a musician, can't always think clearly or find the words I want to say, can't be upright for more than a few hours at a time, can't tolerate sound or bright lights, can't drive very far or travel long distance or on my own. I could list more of my brain injury can'ts, but I think I've included enough to make my point, and I would imagine you're tired of listening to them. Can't, 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 can't. How do you feel listening to all those can'ts? I feel depressed, disheartened, weighted down, powerless. Yes, it is true that the all-encompassing nature of brain injury fills our lives with numerous can'ts. Many are out of our control, and we're unable to change them, no matter how much we want to. We get to grieve those losses. As we just experienced, it is easy to get bogged down in all of those can'ts. If we live our lives focused mostly on what we can no longer do, we will stay stuck, like the paper airplanes in the picture on the previous page. Changing our focus from can't to can is a strategy that can help us break free and rise into a new life. Changing our focus from can't to can helps us to accept our new selves. So let's try that strategy out and flip the script from can't to can on a couple of my earlier statements. It is true, I can't work a full-time job. However, I can volunteer to help other brain injury survivors. I can serve on brain injury committees. I can make a difference. It is true, I can't perform as a musician anymore. However, I can now listen to music again. I can now go to concerts again. I can use my background as a musician to influence the flow and rhythm of my writing and speaking. As you listen to those cans, how do you feel now? I feel more inspired, motivated, hopeful. That's the power of flipping our focus from can't to can. When we focus on what we can do, we transform from being powerless and trapped by circumstance to being powerful and action-oriented. Self-acceptance grows as we figure out what we're good at now. Given the magnitude of losses we cope with after brain injury, it's easy to believe we're not good at anything anymore. That's not true for me, and it's not true for you either. Our new selves have talents, ones that may be different from our old selves. I discovered my new self was good at crafts, something I'd never done before, had no interest in pre-brain injury. We may find ourselves using previous skills in new ways. I'm still a teacher. I still think like a teacher. That mindset influences how I write, how I organize my speeches. I encourage you to make a list of what you can do. Write down as many things as you can think of. It doesn't matter how small, how trivial they are. Notice what brings forth an emotion, what sparks your interest, what piques your curiosity. These are clues that can find out what you're good at now. As we break free from our can'ts and focus on our cans, we have the chance to rise into our new selves and our new lives. And the last section that I'm going to read is from the last one, the thriving after brain injury. I think that sunflowers are a perfect metaphor for thriving. Sunflowers, they turn towards the sun no matter what the weather, whether it is sunny or whether it is cloudy. When there are rainstorms, sunflowers, they bend, but they don't break, which makes them a wonderful symbol for resilience. So the chapter that I'm going to read from this one is the very last one. Make meaning from suffering. Connect to your purpose. None of us chose to sustain a brain injury or to endure the mental, physical, and emotional upheaval it brings. None of us chose to have our lives torn apart. Brain injury takes many choices from us. But one choice we do have is what to do with our suffering. We can choose to reframe it into something meaningful. As the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said, to live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. But surviving is only the beginning. We became survivors the day of our brain injuries. Now it is time to thrive. So I'm going to be bold and edit Nietzsche's quote by changing just one word. My version reads, to live is to suffer. To thrive is to find some meaning in the suffering. My journey toward thriving began 2 years after my injury, when I heard a quiet voice in me whisper, make something. At first, I thought those words were simply instructions to use my hands to create, to paint, to make jewelry, to knit, to take photographs. Over time, I realized those words, make something, also had a deeper meaning. They were an invitation to make meaning from the mess of my life, an opportunity to shape my brain injury experience into something strong, purposeful, and uniquely mine. Making meaning doesn't erase the challenges of living with brain injury, but it can help us understand them. It can change how we look at our experience and soften the edges of suffering. Making meaning can transform loss into resilience, empathy, strength, wisdom, and personal growth. There are many ways to begin. You might share your story in a support group, reflect through journaling or art, help someone in need, spend time in nature, or connect with your spiritual or religious practice. Purpose is meaning put into action. Often we find it where our talents, passions, and values meet. As brain injury survivors, we can discover our talents, passions, and values by getting to know our new selves, focusing on what we can do, and taking risks. Like everything else with brain injury, finding meaning and purpose takes time, it takes patience, and it takes effort. Purpose may be big, bold, or public, like advocating for a cause, writing a book, or speaking at events. But purpose can also live in quiet moments, such as being there for a loved one, creating something for oneself, taking care of a pet or a plant. Finding purpose is a personal journey. Connecting with a sense of purpose can bring meaning to our days, provide motivation to get up in the morning, bring feelings of fulfillment and belonging, and inspire us to set goals and encourage us to move forward. Over my years of living with brain injury, I have found meaning through helping other survivors. Because I'm a teacher at heart, my actions lean toward the educational. I found purpose as a brain injury speaker, mentor, author, group leader, and mentor. This has become my life's work. This final lesson about making meaning from suffering is not the end of the story, but the beginning of something new. It is a foundation for the life we're building. We may not have chosen this brain injury path, but we can choose what we make out of it. And in that choice, we begin to find our story and frame the light. Making meaning and connecting to purpose may not erase the darkness that is brain injury, but they can help us shine in spite of it. So I'd like to end my book reading by giving just with the end of the book. May your journey continue with strength, meaning, and hope. And may you find your own silver learnings along the way. Thank you.